All right. We will call our May meeting of the Conservation and Natural Resource Advisory Council to order. Thanks everybody for being here, both those who are in the room and in the audience and those joining us online. We do have two new members of CONRAC that we'll introduce in just a moment who we're really excited to welcome. And we're going to adjust our agenda just a little bit to move Secretary Dunn's remarks up in the agenda. The Secretary is joining us remotely today because of an event she's doing with the First Lady. So before we do that, I do want to go around and do introductions and then our public comment period. So I'll start. I'm Silas Chamberlain. I work with the York County Economic Alliance. I'm chairman of CONRAC, and we'll go over to Bob.
Bob Kirshner, St. Mary's, Pennsylvania, retired safety consultant to the wood products industry and an avid snowmobiler.
Rocco Ally, North Apollo, Pennsylvania, and a CONRAC member for several years and a retired physical therapist.
Gary Cribbs from Delaware County, a geologist with the Geoscience.
Good morning. I'm Meredith Graham from the Pittsburgh area. I'm an environmental attorney and family caregiver.
Good morning, Janet Sweeney. I'm out of Lackawanna County and I'm with the Pennsylvania Environmental Council.
Ephraim Zimmerman. I'm from Pittsburgh and I'm with the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy.
Sierra Fogel, Jim Thorpe with Pocono Whitewater and Pocono Biking.
Morning, Tanya Brown, recently retired Parks and Recreation Director from Mechanicsburg area.
And Tanya, just since it's your first time joining us, can you give us just the Cliff Notes version of your very extensive career and expertise in Parks and Rec?
I was blessed to work at one place, Mechanicsburg area Parks and Rec. So my experiences in programming, grant writing, working with a community of about 30,000 people just across the river here. I was the past president of PRPS, so I was quite involved with PRPS. And I love writing RECTAP grants and DCNR grants.
Every once in a while, somebody says they love writing DCNR grants. It doesn't happen often, but thank you and welcome.
Good morning. I'm Deborah Ponser, and I'm president of Grow Rural PA. I am in that capacity. I work with communities to help them with strategic and managerial planning and building infrastructure. I spent 16 years working for two different U.S. congressmen as an economic development and workforce specialist. And in that capacity, I served about 17 counties. So saw a lot of Pennsylvania, the very rural part of Pennsylvania. And probably the thing that I'm most proud of is having worked on the PA Wilds since 2005. I was a planning member back in the very early days, served in a number of capacities with the PA Wilds, and I'm very proud of how far we've come with that initiative.
And you're based in the Ridgeway area, right? So good representation from northwest north. Is that what you would call that? PA, the PA Wilds. Ryan.
Hi, Ryan Such with Grow Conservation. I'm the contracted administrator for CONRAC, and I live in York County.
Good morning, Nicole Farraguna. I'm the policy director here at DCNR, as well as the staff liaison for CONRAC.
No, we're all good. Mark Hansford, I'm the Bureau Director for the DCNR Bureau of Recreation and Conservation. I'm on week 3 of this position. You want a little bit about me, or?
Oh, please, start at the beginning.
So I've been with DCNR for almost 14 years. Started as a trail grant manager and worked up through Parks Land Acquisition to Bureau Director. And I got my bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan and master's degree from Michigan as well in urban and environmental planning. So I am a Wolverine in a den of lions here at the DCNR.
Thanks, Mark.
I am Morgan Algrove Hodges. I am the William and Hannah Penn Fellow in the DCNR Policy Office.
Hi, everyone. Allie Bowling, DCNR Policy Specialist. Thanks.
I'm Seth Castle, State Forester and Director of Bureau of Forestry, and no longer the newest Bureau Director in DCNR.
Brett Haller, and Vice President for Western Pennsylvania for the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. I am a Penn State alumni. Mark, sorry about that. Living in State College, Pennsylvania.
And we'll hear a lot more from Brett a little later. He's one of our presenters today. And then I think joining us online, the only CONRAC member that I see is Thad. Thad, you can unmute and introduce yourself, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thad Taylor, forestry consultant and timberland appraiser from Coudersport, Pennsylvania, up in Potter County.
All right. Thanks for joining us, remote, Thad. Okay, now we will move on to our first public comment period. If there's any public comments, please indicate so online. I don't believe we have any in the room today. Ara will let us know if anybody is flagged themselves as wanting to offer public comment. Okay, doesn't look like it, and we didn't receive anything in advance, so we'll close our first public comment period. I did want to welcome Marcus, who just joined us as well. Thanks, Marcus, for being on. And with that, we'll shuffle things a little bit and turn it over to Secretary Dunn for her update. Secretary.
Thank you. I'm up at rainy Kings Gap on top of the mountain here. It's beautiful in the rain. I can still hear the warblers out there. I always love coming up to Kings Gap. For me, it brings back a lot of good memories. For one thing, I was married on the veranda here, so I'm always happy to be here. But I am going to start on a sad note here. Very saddened to share the news that we lost one of our DCNR employees on Friday. Alec Campbell, age 38, was a park resource ranger at Tyler State Park. He died tragically in an accident while installing a buoy line in the Neshaminy Creek to prepare the park for visitors for Memorial Day weekend. He was just starting his third season with us. He was well respected, well loved, and admired by his colleagues. And when I spoke to his wife, she reported he loved his coworkers at Tyler. He was very passionate and positive about his work. Again, well loved by our staff. And his loss is felt profoundly throughout DCNR and beyond. So on behalf of everyone at DCNR, I offer my deepest condolences to Alec's family and friends and loved ones, his coworkers, his wife, Raina, and her two children, and the DCNR colleagues, again, across our system are really feeling this pain. We at DCNR are committed to do everything we can to support the family and our staff at Tyler through this very difficult period. If you would, please join me in a moment of silence to honor Alec Campbell. And thank you for that. The governor did have Commonwealth-wide the flags at half-mast yesterday in Alec's honor. And for those interested, if you search online, you'll easily find the GoFundMe set up by a friend of the family. That is specifically for the two boys, Calder, age 8, and Miles, age 5, for their future in their college particularly. But again, this was obviously a very somber start to the summer season for us. But Memorial Day is the launch of the summer season. We have noted a real uptick in camping. Now, I'm not sure what this last, cool and damp weekend may have done, but in this next one, but we had seen a 30% increase in camping and reservations, and also pavilion reservations all spring. We're still open, still awesome, and our Still Open and Still Awesome campaign is really netting additional visitation to the 124 state parks and the 2.2 million acres of forest land. We have 7,000 campsites across the system. So again, we're making ourselves available and noting it so the people that took up camping during COVID can keep camping, and those of us who have camped all our lives can find the space across Pennsylvania's public lands. I'm here at Kings Gap today at the Environmental Education Center. I'll be joined by First Lady Lori Shapiro, and we're announcing an endeavor to provide free menstrual products across our state park system. We're launching it in 68 state parks. Again, making supplies available to women and girls is really critical. It's the same as hand soap and toilet tissue. It's an essential service we're providing to our park visitation as part of making everyone feel welcome and allowing people to get out there on the trail, to camp, to do their outdoor activities without being impeded or having to make a long trip to a drugstore. So I'm happy to be doing that up here at Kings Gap. We're going to be doing it inside today, it turns out, with the weather. Did want to give a brief update on the North Central Regional ATV Trail. If you want more information, I think Nicole or Seth in the room could really update you. But the trail opened up on May 23rd. Ridership has looked good. The registration is started out fairly healthy here for the season. We're off to a decent start with 3,200 passes being sold already. So I think it's going to be a positive season. Again, to ensure the long-term sustainability, and as was the plan all along, we're facilitating meetings of key stakeholders and looking to really facilitate the formation of a council of government. This council really puts the control in local hands, and it helps the townships and municipalities up there decide where the trail would be each year. Our trail connectors on the state forest land are the same. They stay static. So it's important that the council of governments take over, advertise, and really manage the local roads that are involved. Switching to some really positive news for this budget season, we are very excited about Governor Shapiro's proposal to have a 125th State Park with Laurel Caverns. Laurel Caverns would be donated by David Kale, who has stewarded and cared for the cave for all these years and has really built up an educational and tourist business at the cave and has introduced a lot of people to geology and caves. David's stewardship of this property is remarkable. It's not just the cave, not just the geology, but the surrounding landscape, which is actually very rich. It's on the Chestnut Ridge. The Chestnut Ridge, if you don't know it, is the westernmost of the Allegheny Ridges in Southwest PA. From the top of the ridge, from the parking lot at Laurel Caverns, you can see all the way to Pittsburgh someday. So it's a remarkable place. We've got great wildlife. I was able to help scoot a rattlesnake off the road on my way out of the cave a couple of weeks ago. I know the great warbler population was singing from the parking lot when I was there a few weeks ago. But as David likes to say, if you really want to know who owns Laurel Caverns, it's the bats. His quote says, "We just use it in the summer with their permission. All the water that enters the cave is contained on the property, and that keeps the cave clean and pristine." Obviously, DCNR, if we can transfer the ownership and make it a state park, we would want to continue his stewardship of the natural environment and the bats and the whole natural environment of the cave, and also bring that geology lesson to as many school kids and much of the public as we can. The other side benefit I'm noting is that all of our literacy on geology is increasing exponentially as we all get to cave tours, we all read up. For us in the Pennsylvania State Park System, it would be the first cave state park. So it's pretty exciting. We're obviously very excited. We're working with the legislature. Local legislators are very supportive. And the other action that the governor proposed in this budget cycle with an additional $5 million for both is Glenanoco, adding the Glenanoco Trail System to the DCNR land holding. It'd be part of Lehigh Gorge State Park, as I believe we mentioned. I know Sierra Fogel has been deeply involved in that from way back. But again, under our stewardship and as part of our mission, state parks, we can make it safer, add some safety features, add some ingress and egress for emergency management, and really open it up to the public that are visiting the Jim Thorpe area. So we're pretty excited by that too. As with Laurel Caverns, the legislators in the region are very supportive, and in fact have been encouraging this for some time. So we're hoping that both of these actions and the $5 million we need to make them happen are part of this budget cycle. And we are discussing it with the legislature weekly. So thanks for thinking about that and any support you can lend to that. I'm very excited to welcome our new CONRAC members. I've met both Tanya and I've known Deb for quite some time. Tanya Brown, as you know, has a long and distinguished career in Parks and Recreation and in leading with Park and Recreation through her work at PRPS. So I think that's a great addition to CONRAC. And Deb Ponder has really been a key informant and advisor and leader for us in the PA Wilds. Her deep knowledge of rural economy and her deep knowledge of really how to bring the equity and opportunity of public lands to bear for the economy of the Pennsylvania Wilds and all rural areas is a great asset to CONRAC. So we're very excited by these new members of CONRAC, and I think they'll really bring their wisdom and knowledge to bear for the department in these new roles. I'm glad that Mark Hansford's in the room. Mark, note that someone said they love, that Tanya loves filling out grant applications. So you might interview her there in the room later. So we have continually improved our grants program. So it's wonderful to hear that feedback from a CONRAC member. Again, we're very proud and pleased to appoint Mark as our director of the Bureau of Recreation and Conservation. That was a role I held years ago. And what's gratifying for me as a leader is that when every person that's appointed to a position is better than we were in that position. So Mark is going to do great in that role. He's been a phenomenal division chief, and he's got knowledge and wisdom that's going to be very helpful in us reaching the communities across Pennsylvania with our grant program. BRC is leading for the Trail of the Year event. The 2025 Trail of the Year is the Path of the Flood Trail in Cambria County in South Fork. Ironically, if this rain keeps up, the South Fork may be ripping. It's funny, the Path of the Flood could be kind of maybe flooding again. But the Path of the Flood is a 14-mile bike ride. It begins at the breast of the South Fork Dam, the very famous dam that broke in the Johnstown flood in 1889. Causing the worst flood in history. I think it still stands as the worst flood in history, the Johnstown flood. It's close to my life because my ancestors were in Johnstown and some of them were lost in the Johnstown flood. On June 18th, we'll officially celebrate the Delaware River as a 2025 River of the Year. They won a hearty competition led by Peck and Power. Janet's in the room there. Janet can give you the details, but Delaware won as River of the Year. So that's the third time the Delaware has made it since 2002. And the river is home to the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area, which is one of the 20 most visited National Park Service sites in the country. So it's a very popular site. So it deserves this attention. And while you may not, may seem in the distant past right now, we had a major wildfire season this spring. I think maybe the rain dance we were doing at DCNR maybe caused this excessive amount of rain to fall. But we had two big fires. The Packerton fire near Jim Thorpe, we set that up as a type 3 incident. It was burning hot and fast in a very public area. Managed to not have injuries or any loss of structures. And the Thompson Hollow and Hammond Rock fires here in the Michaux burned almost 3,000 acres, very visible from 81, and it was threatening several homes. And again, a huge thanks to our DCNR trained wildland firefighters, some of the best in the nation, and the local and county and volunteer fire departments for their great assistance and coordination. We again, both fires, because of the response and the training, were handled without significant injuries and without loss of structures. Governor Shapiro visited the Michaud fire and thanked the firefighters, both our staff and the wildland firefighters, and also the local first responders and volunteer fire companies for their service. Last week, we sent 38 Rangers that graduated from our Ranger Academy. So John Norbeck, myself, and many from state parks were involved in commissioning a new class of our law enforcement rangers, our DCNR rangers. So that was great to see that the interest and also the rigorous training that our rangers go through, and they're deployed out in the field right now for the what we hope will be a busy summer season. Forest Health, our spray program is just wrapped up. Our forest staff, that run the spray program for spongy moth and other pests, did a remarkable job of managing it through rain events and getting the flights and the spray done safely off and on through the rainy couple of weeks that we had for the spray season. So we treated 65,000 acres for spongy moth. We also had a fall cankerworm outbreak in the Laurel Highlands. A lot of legislative interest. We responded by treating 9,800 acres, in cooperation with state parks. So to further combat these invasives, we established the Pennsylvania Invasive Replacive Pilot Program, and we provide native trees to replace invasive species like trees and shrubs that people have in their property. I was able to get out to one of the invasive replacive events near Carlisle, and that was really well subscribed to. All the available native plant species were claimed, and people brought in the bad and the ugly of the invasives that were in their properties. So again, outreach about invasives and pests is important, as well as our professionally led spray program. And if you do want to know more about Forest Health, I understand. I heard Seth in the room there. He could certainly answer that. So I believe with that, I will wrap up and get ready for the menstrual equity program that I'm about to launch here at Kings Gap. I will be down in the building, maybe while you're still in the building, but probably run a little too late to see you all. But again, thanks for making the trip in the rain, and wish I could see you in person. And thanks for your service by stepping on CONRAC and giving DCNR your time and your wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Do you have a couple minutes if there's any follow-up questions?
Yes, I do. I've got about 15 minutes here.
Well, great. We'll just use up all your free time before your event. Thanks, Cindy. Anybody else on council have questions for the secretary? Because if not, I have two. Cindy, I think we've asked this of you the last couple meetings, but any current thoughts on the status of federal funding impacts to the work of DCNR right now? Anything that you've learned or anything that's changed in the last couple months?
Yeah, Nicole actually has, as part of her update, some bad news we received recently. So I'll let Nicole handle that with her report. Again, we're tracking all of the current grants very carefully, but Seth came back with a concerning report that Nicole will share.
Okay, great, thank you. And this one might be more of a Seth question, but fall cankerworm is a new one for me. What's the deal with fall cankerworm? Is it widespread? Has that been around for a long time? I'm sure Ephraim also knows about this, but anybody that wants to give the Cliff Notes version on fall cankerworm?
I will turn to Seth on that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. The fall cankerworm, it actually, it's a native insect, and it impacts oak forests. And so we viewed this, it's a forest health issue. A lot of times our forest health issues like spongy moth are from invasive insects, but the fall cankerworm is a native insect, and we decided to treat for it in targeted areas on state parks and state forest lands is really impacting oak forests, which have really been hit hard by various stressors, climate change, drought, spongy moth, and some of those oak trees, not only incredibly valuable from a forest health perspective, a resilience perspective, oak trees are really good at storing carbon too. And also, not to mention, there are many benefits for wildlife and for timber production. So there were a lot of reasons why we want to try to protect those oak forests. We were concerned that another defoliation event would kill those trees. So we tacked it on to our spongy moth spray program to treat for those, treat those areas. And so that's why we decided it was a relatively new approach for us. But it's really important, regardless of the threat, to protect some of those forests. And so we made a decision to go in there and add to our spongy moth spray program and make sure we're protecting those forests, keeping them resilient, and providing all the values and benefits that they provide. We did see some success. The spray program went very well, but we'll be doing some monitoring this summer to see how effective it was.
Okay, great. Thank you for the context. Okay, with that.
Always something with forest health.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Secretary Dunn. Good luck with the First Lady and your event, and we'll see you soon.
And thank you. Thanks, everybody. Safe travels.
All right. So now we can move on to approval of our prior meeting minutes. You should have received these minutes from Ryan via email, and I sent a copy again yesterday. Are there any revisions or other comments on the minutes?
I just wanted to state for the record that Meredith recommended a few revisions just as far as who was online, as far as council members, and then a typo about a month of. So I fixed those already this morning, so I can issue a final version.
Okay.
Unless anybody else has something.
Any additional changes beyond those? All right. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as revised?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you. Our minutes are approved. And thank you, Ryan. I'll give a brief council report, and then I'll turn over to our working group chairs if you have anything to add. We did have a successful CONRAC conversation last week that focused on forest and state park infrastructure and outdoor economy. We had Marcy Mowry join us from Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundation. It was only a week ago, but I still have to look at my notes to remember. Michael Twigg from Bureau of Facility and Design and Construction at DCNR, and Chris Kemmerer, who's with the Section Chief of Education and Interpretation with State Parks, and then Nathan Regner, Director of the Pennsylvania Office of Outdoor Recreation. Each of them spoke about different aspects of the need to keep investing in our infrastructure, in our state parks and forests. We've heard from Marcy before about the significant backlog of infrastructure improvements and needed maintenance. And although in the last couple of years we've made significant progress in the scale of hundreds of millions of dollars in addressing that backlog, there's still, I think, $1 billion plus backlog that needs to be addressed. So there's always a need for continual investment in our park and forest infrastructure. Ryan, do you know the final count of how many people we had join us? 38 people. So a pretty good group. About on average for our conversations, although I think a couple years ago, we had a really well-attended one on diversity and equity and access. And we do have one coming up in the fall that we can discuss during our working session after the public meeting and start the planning for that. I know some of you have expressed interest in helping to plan that topic. But thank you to everybody who handled logistics for that and to our speakers for joining us. We will also talk in our working session about our July field visit and public meeting, which will take place in the Reading area. For those listening online that may want to join us virtually, that'll be on July 23rd, Wednesday. People are also welcome to join us in person at the Nature Place, which is Berks Nature's fantastic facility just right on the outskirts of Reading. And we'll talk through that full itinerary during our working session. We won't belabor that in a public meeting, but the team has put together a really great visit to Reading and all the different assets like the Reading Skate Park, the Schuylkill River Trail, Nolde Environmental Center, and a bunch of other good speakers and good stops. I think with that, I'll turn to the working group updates, and I'll give mine first for economic contributions. The Elevate process continues, which was the statewide engagement work from the Office of Outdoor Recreation around creation of an outdoor business alliance. That included a series of 10 workshops across Pennsylvania that engaged, I forget the total, but it was like 700 different participants. They were really well attended. I know it was a bit of a marathon for the DCNR team and for planning team that all, were going to all those meetings. And we had participants that went to multiple meetings too, which was kind of cool. And some great themes emerging around what the outdoor industry needs to succeed in terms of access to capital and better advocacy, access to business resources and technical assistance, and a bunch of other good things that the Outdoor Business Alliance will be able to carry forward. So as a reminder, that was a year-long kind of feasibility and conceptual study around an Outdoor Business Alliance. That process wraps up in the next month here. And then the Office of Outdoor Recreation will be able to publicly share, here's what we learned, here's where we're heading. And, it's inevitable that coming out of that, there's an entity that's formed to, represent the outdoor business industry in Pennsylvania. So very exciting. A lot of good momentum, a lot of behind the scenes funding coming into place to help push that forward. So a lot will be announced here in the next 6 weeks or so. And as always, CONRAC members participated in the original GORP in those Elevate meetings, and I'm sure can engage in the Outdoor Business Alliance moving forward. Janet, did you almost?
Is there any sense of where that Outdoor Business Alliance, is it going to be a DCNR? Is it going to be the state of Pennsylvania? Do we have a sense of who's going to be taking ownership of that?
So that's, that'll be, I guess, a recommendation coming out of it is that it's a separate entity, not a state government entity. Now, whether that's the recommendation that steering committee runs with, or they have a different vision, I don't know. But we looked at best practices from across the country, and the ones that are most successful have really strong ties to state government, but they're a separate entity, so that, in those rare situations where advocacy needs to happen at the state agency, to the state agencies and to the government, it's one step removed. And it allows you to do some fundraising and some things that you can't do through state government. So as much as we have a duplication of many different organizations out there, I think we're looking at potentially another one that'll still be pretty nimble and low overhead, but will be like its own separate 501c something.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I know everybody has in front of them a copy of Forests for All. Last meeting, we had one copy and there was a cage fight over who got to take it. And I forget who it was. It might have been me. But in the meantime, I think we tasked Meredith as lead of our planning work group to take a look at the plan and see, how it connects to CONRAC's work. And I know she's taken a look at it. So Meredith, do you want to give your report?
Sure, thank you. First, I'll start by saying it's an excellent document, and I think it's well organized. It accomplishes a lot. It gives a great summary of the work that DCNR already does in the Bureau of Forestry, and it points them in a great forward-looking direction. The content includes many of the topics we discuss at CONRAC. It's comprehensive and touches on traditional forestry concepts like you would expect, and talks about capacity of forests to store carbon. We've talked a lot about that topic here at CONRAC. It serves, the Bureau recognizes that they're serving an increasingly diverse public, and their themes of outdoor recreation and education along those lines sort of woven throughout the plan. What I found really interesting is that the plan places great emphasis on people development, investing in people, particularly within the Bureau's own staff. And I found that to be unique. I've not seen that kind of focus in other strategic plans, and I think that speaks well of the Bureau. And that is also where I think we'll see a lot of connection in the work that CONRAC is going to do going forward. So we've talked a lot about workforce development, and we're planning a program for the fall that will touch on that. So I don't see any particular action items arising out of this for CONRAC, but that section of the plan about workforce development, people investment will be really significant for us as we look forward to the fall. I do encourage everyone to read it. The plan has great pictures, I have to say, and it's formatted really well. It's 40 pages, but it reads easily. The format's just set up for readability, and I really appreciated that aspect of it.
I was going to joke to Seth that I found a typo, but that ship has sailed, right? Thank you, Meredith, for taking a deep dive into it. Any questions or thoughts for Meredith? So I think we'll continue to be available to Seth and the team, and if there's ways that CONRAC can reinforce the work that happens through the strategic plan. But I'd echo Meredith in saying it's a great planning process, a lot of engagement, and it shows in the final document. Okay, move on to Bob and outdoor recreation, if Bob has an update.
Thank you, Silas. The outdoor recreation group did not meet between meetings at the beginning of the month as we usually do. There just wasn't anything on the agenda to discuss. Since then, as the secretary mentioned, NRAT has again come to the forefront, at least from a trail standpoint. I was able to attend a meeting a couple weeks ago at the Lumber Museum where representation was there from virtually all the governments that are involved in the NRAT. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss the management structure that had been settled on through the last year's worth of meetings and committee meetings as far as managing the program. As the secretary mentioned, council government approach with a regional authority consisting of members from all the municipalities and an executive committee elected by that membership. This whole process was, well, what do they say? How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And we had several meetings, or a couple meetings with a room full of 60 or more people. And then we did have side meetings with committees that were set up to address the various aspects of what would be important here. The final product, I think, is well reflects the work of everyone who was involved. If there is a concern, I can preface by saying, see, I think this bottle was half empty. So if there is a concern, I do have one that I think we can maybe hash out in the working session this afternoon. And that is that it is a council of governments approach. I'm concerned about the representation of the group who we're trying to provide the opportunity to, and that would be the ATV and side-by-side users. I'd like to see their they have a decent amount of input into what the final product is. Now, in discussions this morning with Nicole, who was also at the meeting, she did bring some points out that I actually hadn't thought about. And I know that the plan is for this executive committee to select and hire an executive director who will have the ATV passion, if you will. But I'd like to engage the whole council in that discussion to determine whether we feel it's necessary to provide any input on the subject. So that's the NRAT thing. Overall, a lot of people put a lot of work in. I think we're off to a good start. The economic numbers that we've seen look good. I think $14 million plus in impact for the last year of the program. So we're on the right track. We're miles ahead of where we were 3 years ago. And I thank everyone involved for that. And with that, I'll ask my co-chair, Gary Cribbs, if he has anything to add from a recreation standpoint.
Well, nothing to contribute on that front.
I'll just note, well, one, thanks to Bob for his commitment and work over the years to advance programs like NRAD. The idea behind these meetings was really to engage all of these key partners so that it's not a DCNR-led initiative, but it's really a community, a regional-led initiative, because that's what really needs to happen. DCNR is at the table. We need to be a strong partner, but we also need to ensure that the communities, the counties are vested and feel like they have a voice. We originally were looking at an authority model. I think it was like in the first 1 or 2 meetings where we were like downstairs in a meeting and there was others upstairs in a meeting. We were all doing different work groups and we found out in that meeting, oh yeah, no, they're talking about doing a council of government now. So really smart people, really dedicated people to the process. And it was nice to see such a strong representation at the county level, at the local level as well. So Will Hunt, got to give a shout out to Will Hunt, who is the planning director in Potter County, who has just done a tremendous job of convening as well. So.
And just for the context of our new members, this ATV or regional ATV trail has been something of strong interest to CONRAC. It's a novel approach to how DCNR and PennDOT and local municipalities work together and trying to work through a process that makes it beneficial to everybody. We took a field visit up there and spent a day, visiting stops along the ATV route. So, and got to see firsthand from some of the businesses that economic impact that Bob noted. So it's been a really good process, and now it sounds like it's got real legs and is moving in the right direction with some tweaks. Any questions for Bob or Gary?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
I've heard a lot about government. I've heard very little about local trail groups in that area. If you want to know what's going on locally, I think it would be very wise to take input from the public. And I'm not hearing that. Is public involved at all?
Yes. So those level of partners, the general public, not just yet. They will be at some point. A council of government is a quasi-government, so it would be open to public meetings and opportunity for people to provide comment. But in this process, yes. So they have included the user groups, the industry, the organizations, motorized, non-motorized. So I think that they've done a really good job of bringing people to the table. But Bob, you've been at these meetings as well, and you may have a comment on that as well.
Yeah, I just obviously this process it's pretty complicated, and overshadowing the entire thing is that the entire snowmobile ATV law needs to be rewritten to recognize the realities of today's machinery and the user groups that are using it. It's just exploded. 30 years ago, we had more snowmobiles than ATVs. Today, the ATV registration or the Snowmobile ATV Registration Fund is made up of 87% ATV registrations and 13% snowmobile registrations. So it's a use that has exploded to the point that I do believe that as this process evolves, I'm an advocate for, as Rocco said, I'm an advocate for more input from the local user groups. There's nothing I think any worse than trying to build a product for somebody without involving the people that are going to use the product. So those are my feelings on it. I'm sure you haven't heard the last from me on the topic, and so I will continue to engage as it seems appropriate.
Bob, if I may, would it be a feasible idea to have CONRAC write a letter expressing the same, we could put that, I would think Bureau of Forestry would be, they were basically the ones that worked with this. that would be an appropriate place to put it. But I think our group's support of local involvement going up to the board level, where they would be part of the decision makers. And some of those people may not have post-high school educations, but they've got the thing called the School of Hard Knocks. And that's important. And that's why I'm pushing to try to get some board members from the public on there, because they're an important part of it. A lot of that success, particularly the eatery we saw on top of the hill, that was all public. And the motel up there that tripled in its size. And that brings tax dollars in. So to me, they're important. Thank you.
To respond to Rocco's question, I would like to have that discussion in the working group this afternoon. I think the council as a whole can decide what the appropriate action would be to take.
I've got an engagement. I got to be at it 5.
Not to belabor this, but you know, this project initially was started at the behest of the as a fiscal note in the budget, and I think there's an appetite out there to see more fiscal notes in budgets addressing these types of topics, and it would be nice if we could do things in a collaborative fashion. Sometimes, you know, you need to kick, but I think if we all contribute, the end product will be better. So thanks.
Just a note to your point, Bob, about the necessary changes that need to happen to the vehicle code. Obviously, we're aware of it. PennDOT's aware of it. State Police is aware of it. And so there was a policy regulation work group that was working. We're talking, you know, that's a long-term objective, obviously, as we move this forward, but we obviously would like to work collaboratively to make those changes happen. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Ephraim, Natural Resources, any update for your work group?
Yeah, park infrastructure and park and forest infrastructure group. Yes, but natural resources.
Thank you.
Part of that.
I literally have Ephraim, Natural Resources on my list.
We didn't meet last month, but we had a lot of discussion, clearly from the infrastructure Conrac conversation. So that was something. Next meeting, we will be focusing on some of the outcomes from that, some of the discussion points, and we have a couple people here today, so we could have a good working discussion later. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I don't know if we have, is Marcus on? Marcus, if you have an update from the Equitable Access Working Group?
Yeah, sure thing. Good morning, everyone. In short, we've identified a few additional stakeholders and partners whose involvement would strengthen the committee's impact and effectiveness. We've also just done some general scouring and identified some existing plans and objectives from departments within DCNR and other organizations that would align with the goals of the committee. So we're currently engaging these groups, actively seeking out their collaboration in hopes to foster just broader impact and engagement. So I would say within our next CONRAC meeting, we hope to share some promising updates on just some preliminary ideas of how we could execute an effective collaborative model here. So thanks everyone that showed up to the meeting. It's great to see individuals engaging in the committee. Hopefully we can sustain that moving forward. So thanks again for the time. We'll provide some updates in the next meeting.
Great. Thank you, Marcus. And to our new Conrac members, as you saw, we have working groups and you got a little taste of the kinds of issues they're working through. So as you learn more, if there's ones that you're interested in joining, they kind of come in cycles where sometimes there's a lot of activity, sometimes there's not as much. But really our working groups are what we make of them because we're the ones driving them forward. So just let us know where your interests lie. I guess, Nicole, your policy update.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And thank you all for your great work. And again, your commitment to the council doesn't happen without the work you're doing. So thank you. Once again, welcome, Deborah and Tanya. We're really excited to have you on board. And of course, any questions you have, feel free to reach out to myself, Ryan, Silas. We're all here to provide support. And of course, your fellow council members as well. So again, I'm thrilled to have you on board. In addition to the state forest plan, you also noticed you have 2 fact sheets, one for Laurel Caverns and one for Glenanoco. These are, of course, the 2 assets that have been identified in Governor Shapiro's budget, along with a $5 million increase for DCNR to acquire and manage these over time. You'll see that there is, obviously additional investments that will occur as we create the 125th State Park at Laurel Caverns, and of course the necessary improvements at Glenanoco. I've had the opportunity to visit both Glenanoco many years ago when it was still under the operations of Game Commission. It's an amazing trail, and I'm so excited to see it reopen, as so many people, Sierra can attest, so many people are excited about that. And then just last week got to visit Laurel Caverns, which is just an amazing hidden jewel. I mean, just literally an amazing hidden jewel. And David, the owner and steward of this property, has just done an incredible job of managing this resource. Just a quick little story about David, who is just fascinating. He built on this amazing landscape what would be the first metric home in the United States. And then after he saw the impact of this home on the landscape, dismantled it and took it down and refurbished the natural space back to its original state. He cares about this land. He is donating this land to DCNR and wants to see this land stewarded, this resource stewarded over time. So just an incredible person. And thank you to him for making this happen. Just a couple of updates on the federal side. So DCNR recently submitted comments to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service related to their proposed rulemaking regarding the Endangered Species Act that would rescind the regulatory definition of harm. So this effectively reverses decades of precedents and regulatory protections of critical habitat. The ruling, in essence, seeks to eliminate protections for critical habitat, which in turn would severely weaken wildlife protections for threatened, vulnerable, and endangered species. And we know that the loss of habitat results in the loss of biodiversity. And in fact, it can result in extinctions. Pennsylvania manages our species based on data. We collaborate across state and federal agencies through our Conservation Explorer, and we are in our Pennsylvania Natural Heritage Program. And so we have to ensure that we have reliable data, and we're relying on science when making decisions around managing species. Removing the definition of harm would seriously weaken the conservation value associated with the Habitat Conservation Plan for the bat HCP that we partner very closely with the Game Commission on. And HCP is, particularly for, forestry, we're really designed to accommodate economic development to the greatest extent possible by authorizing the limited and unintentional take of listed species. And so what they're doing is quite unprecedented. And so we have some serious concerns. I can send those comments around so you can read them. We've also submitted, the secretary submitted a letter of support to the congressional delegation here in Pennsylvania in support of the national heritage areas. National heritage, as many federal resources, federal assets are currently under threat. And we have some real concern. We're about to celebrate America's 250th anniversary. Our 6 national heritage areas are critical to not just understanding our past and our heritage and educating our current generations, but also ensuring that future generations are stewards of this culture and history and this legacy. They contribute significantly to our local economies, and they work just so, they work very closely with our conservation and recreation partners and across regions and communities. We also just learned, I think this was in the last week or so, that a grant through the Highlands Conservation Act has been rescinded. This was a grant over $800,000 to advance trail improvements within the city of Easton and connecting to a certain regional connectors, including the DNL. We're also watching proposed cuts to the National Park Service, right now estimated at about $900 million. Very concerned about what will happen to some of those heritage sites managed by national parks. Of course, our precious national parks as well. And then the U.S. Forest Service cuts, we're monitoring those. There's already been proposals within H.R. 1, which would rescind all unobligated balances of the Inflation Reduction Act for the Forest Legacy Program, as well as the Forest Landowner Support Program. We had partnered with a regional organization to advance a grant application for the Landowner Support Program in the amount of $5 million. It's very, that there's uncertainty around that program going forward. So there's obviously a lot of happening at the current, at the federal level at the moment, with the president's proposed budget, as well as the H.R. 1 that just recently passed in the House. And we suspect that the Senate will take that up fairly quickly as well. And that's all I have.
Any questions for Nicole? I assume, Nicole, you can let us know as a council if there's specific ways that we can advocate on some of these funding issues that are important to DCNR. I know there's lots of people weighing in, but we are a bipartisan, nonpartisan advisory council, so and have good statewide connections. So if there's work that we can do, in particular, just let us know.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay. Eric is not with us, so
I will just note Eric is touring Laurel Caverns today with the House Tourism Committee. Sorry, I thought I had turned it on. Eric is currently touring the Laurel Caverns today with the House Tourism Committee, so he is not able to come. But if there is any questions for Eric specifically, we certainly can get an update from him. In the process.
I assume his hands are pretty busy with budget stuff right now, right?
Yes, and yeah, so.
Okay. So we'll move on to our presentation. Bad news is you have to hear more from me. Good news is you'll get to hear from Brett after me, so it's worth sticking through my 20 minutes or so. Ara can bring up the presentation. I think we wanted to talk about, as a theme this month, the economic impact of trails. So the way we've structured this is I'm going to talk a little bit how, from a personal and professional perspective, I look at trails through my work at an economic development organization, and then give you 2 examples of trails that are having significant economic impact on their regions. And then Brett's going to talk from the perspective of the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, which does statewide work and fosters trail collaboration really throughout Pennsylvania and beyond, as you'll see. So hopefully lots of good and relevant content. Or do I advance the slides or do I need to give you the look? Okay. Okay. I can come up front if I need to do. Yeah, I'll do it that way. I don't have to do the slide thing. All right. So I always like to start when I talk about trails as an economic developer by saying that I work for an organization that is Chamber of Commerce and an economic development corporation and a business improvement district and a Main Street. And on behalf of the county commissioners, we also staff our general authority, our industrial development authority, our redevelopment authority, our land bank authority, and a bunch of other tools. So we are, in a lot of ways, a traditional economic development organization. We do projects like this one. This is the Yorktown Hotel redevelopment, $70 million hotel redevelopment in downtown York. We work with very large industrial partners. This is a mining operation that's located in York County. That's part of the global refractory supply chain. We finance and help tap into public funding for equipment purchases and some of our large manufacturers. This is Voith Hydro, that does hydroelectric turbines for the global market. And then we work with iconic brands that you're probably familiar with, from Harley Davidson to Utz potato chips and everything in between. But alongside all that, we care deeply about our rail trails. This is the York Heritage Rail Trail, our footpaths, our waterways, our parks, our trails, and outdoor recreation. And we don't care about those things because they are nice and they feel good. We care about them because they are part of an extensive outdoor economy in Pennsylvania and in York County. And hopefully you're becoming very familiar with these figures from Nathan's work and the Office of Outdoor Recreation. But just to reiterate, in Pennsylvania, outdoor recreation is a $19 billion industry. Unlike many of our industrial sectors in Pennsylvania, it is actually growing at a 5% rate on average over the last decade. There was a massive jump in the latest numbers of roughly 10%. And we used to say that it's sustained about 4,500 businesses across Pennsylvania, but through the Elevate outreach that's been undertaken, we've been able to document more than 9,000 businesses that are part of the outdoor recreation economy. Obviously, a sector of that size has significant employment and in turn generates a whole bunch of state and local taxes. So the question isn't why economic development organizations should care about it. It's like, why wouldn't economic development organizations care about such a huge sector? And in Pennsylvania, outdoor recreation is a truly statewide business. It's not just our rural parts of the county, of the state, although that's where most of our outdoor assets are. You can see concentrations of outdoor businesses around Philadelphia and down in my part of the state in Lancaster and York counties, Pittsburgh, Erie, but really everywhere in between. And each of those dots represents a different sector within the outdoor industry, from manufacturing to hospitality, to creative services, wholesaling. So it's not just, your local outdoor recreation outfitter or your bed and breakfast along a rail trail. It's, very large companies that are doing business in York County or in Pennsylvania as well. On a county level, the reason we care about this and these stats that we share with our chamber members is that there's 5,200 York County residents employed in the outdoor economy. And we've seen that number go up by 14% over the last decade. We like to joke with them, many of whom come from real estate and banking and financial services and insurance, that the number of people working in outdoor rec is more than their sectors combined. And yet we very rarely talk about outdoor rec as an industry that, needs promotion and investment. Those 5,200 York County residents generate at least $135 million in wages each year that are spent locally and in the region. And of course, we're proud of having 4 state park units that host more than 2 million visits a year and generate $4 million in consumer spending. But we are actually more excited about this slide than we are the last one, because in the 21st century, the real competitive advantage that communities have when it comes to economic development is being able to attract and retain talent, because businesses have to follow talent. And when you look at the data and what talent is telling us, when people are choosing where they're going to live, biking and walking paths are consistently a top 3 consideration. We know that from the National Realtors Association. We also know that access to high quality park and recreation opportunities are important to choosing where to live across the board, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent, whether you're a Gen Zer or a millennial or a Gen Xer or a baby boomer, whether you are white, whether you are non-white, across the board, it's an important consideration. So the communities that have those high quality park and recreation opportunities like trails will attract new residents and retain them. Those that don't have it will have a much more difficult time. We know this is especially true for young people, recent college graduates who increasingly say place is more important than job. So they're picking where they live and they say, I want to live in Moab or Boulder, or name your iconic Western city close to the outdoors. And then they're saying, okay, now I'll pick a job. And that has only become more prevalent with hybrid and remote working post-pandemic. We also know that this isn't just about where people are choosing to live. It's also influencing where businesses are making their next investment. So there's this whole group of people called corporate site selectors. They're the people who work for large corporations and are tasked with finding their next site to locate their business. And they will literally work on a list that says there's a site in Ohio that's 500 acres. They'll give us this much in incentives. The energy is going to cost this. The average wage is this. And they'll create a list for their clients. And then they'll say, okay, have at it. Pick which one you're going to invest $1 billion in or $500 million in. And increasingly, site selectors are telling us that quality of life is topping out the list on how they make those decisions about where their next investment is going to be. And you can see quality of life is number 2 on this list, higher than some of the stuff we talk about more often, like slashing environmental regulations, lowering energy costs, lowering our corporate tax rate. They're all still important. But if you don't have quality of life, which is attainable housing, walkable communities, bicycle and pedestrian amenities, trails, parks, open space, then you're not even competitive for attracting businesses in your community. And being a nerd, I looked back for the last, 12 years of Site Selection Magazine, which every year puts out a survey that says, tell us what the most important factors are from the largest businesses in America. And quality of place outranks every other factor over the last decade. It has only gotten more pronounced post-pandemic, and in fact outranks now environmental regulations by 20% and expedited permitting by 19%. And I don't say that to say permitting and environmental regulations and balancing development against preservation isn't important. It's just that it's less important than quality of life, and yet we never talk about that in our economic strategy. So this is the conversation that economic development organizations and chambers of commerce should be having across Pennsylvania. Some are, but it's come very slowly. So in York County, how we're acting on all this knowledge is to build a focus on promoting investment in arts and culture and outdoor infrastructure into our comprehensive plan. And so we have a whole chapter on economic development. It's now part of our 10-year economic development plan. Our county commissioners have approved this unanimously, our planning commission. So it is the blueprint for economic development. And at the heart of it is this focused on quality of place. And one of the signature programs coming out of that is the York County Trail Towns program. We launched it almost exactly 5 years ago, this June, during the midst of the pandemic, in 5 communities along the Heritage Rail Trail: York, Seven Valleys, Glen Rock, Railroad, and New Freedom. York being by far the largest, the city of 45,000. Those other communities being very small. Railroad has about 250 residents. And then the next year we added Wrightsville along the Susquehanna River, which is sort of a hub between River Trail, Northwest River Trail, Mason-Dixon Trail, and then Hanover, which is at the intersection of trail development and new trail, the Hanover Trolley Trail. So all 7 communities are trying to reverse what you're seeing on this screen, which is that our historic boroughs are outdoor asset rich. So the mapping that you're seeing on the left is actually from DCNR and Trust for Public Land, showing that, the red and the orange are areas that are not well served by outdoor rec. When you look at our boroughs, they are, because they're walkable. They're increasingly attracted by connected by trails. They have legacy parks in them already. But when you map places that have economic inequity, those same communities pop up. So they're strong in outdoor assets. They're very weak on economic opportunity because all the industry that used to define those railroad communities is now gone. So a Trail Towns program, when you strip back the outdoor rec part, is really about economics and saying, what can you leverage in these places that have been deindustrialized and lost businesses, and create that economic opportunity. And it just happens that that's leveraging outdoor assets. To give you a sense of what this looks like on the Heritage Rail Trail, these are 4 of our Trail Town communities. The census tracts surrounding them are on average 5% poverty. When you look at the Trail Towns themselves, they're 14%, 17%, 8%, 5%. So there are pockets of inequity within relatively prosperous rural Southern York County. And historically, economic development organizations like mine had no tools to offer a small town like this. We're scaled to do like manufacturing investment and, $20 million equipment purchases, not to do, small retail development in these very small towns. And Trail Towns lets us do that. So at the heart of our Trail Towns program is also this fact that we have a trail that's 26 miles long in Southern York County that brings in visitors from across the Mid-Atlantic. So what you're looking at here is a heat map showing the home location of every visitor to the Heritage Rail Trail in the last 7 years. And you can see a concentration of homes in Southern York County along the rail trail, as you would expect. But you can see that density extending to Harrisburg, Lancaster, down into Maryland, Washington, D.C., and Baltimore, and really across the whole Mid-Atlantic. And the goal is to get all those visitors who are coming to use the trail to also come off into the communities and spend money where they're there and bring all that outside capital in. We can also look, and this is all based on cell phone data that's aggregated and anonymized and that we can visualize. We can look at how far people travel to get to the trail. So we can see that for the Heritage Rail Trail, 58% of the visitors to the trail come from less than 10 miles away, and a significant portion come from less than half a mile away, which means mostly locals are using the trail, which is a good thing. It means it's a high quality of life asset for locals. It's worth investing in it. And then 30% are coming from, up to 50 miles away, 10 to 50 miles away. So they're coming from Lancaster and Dauphin and Cumberland and Adams counties and Maryland and coming up and using the trail and probably doing a day trip. And then you have this 12% who are tourists who are defined by traveling more than 50 miles away to get to the trail. And I would argue that this is what you want every recreational asset to look like in every trail. The vast majority of use should be from locals because it should be first and foremost about quality of life for the people living in the region. And then you should always have that slither of tourism because that's your outside dollars coming in. If it's reversed, then you have an asset that's all about tourists and not about quality of life for residents. So even though only 12% of trail visitors are tourists, that still amounts to 20,000 plus visits by tourists a year. We know from the State Tourism Board that the average tourism visit is about $419 in consumer spending per visit. So if you're just doing a really rough approximation, Heritage Rail Trail generates $8.6 million just from 12% of its users. And then the other 88% are also spending while they're there. But that's true. That's pure money coming in from outside the region, even outside of 50 miles away. And we can also learn about where people go before and after they use the trail. And this is really telling. So the dot in the middle of this graph is the Heritage Rail Trail. Everything on the left is where people came to directly prior to visiting the trail. Everything on the right is where they went to right after. You can see a lot of people coming from home or returning to home. That makes sense. A lot of people going to work or returning to work, which is a sign that people are using the trail for commuting as well, which is great in the more urbanized areas. And then you can see gas stations and convenience stores and restaurants and other attractions on there. And you can actually drill in even further to see specifically what are those businesses and attractions that people are visiting. And when you look at the list, you might not recognize these names, but a lot of them are small independent businesses in our trail towns. Some are other tourist destinations that people are visiting while in the region. And some are, trailheads and parks that they're also going to start their visit to the trail. When you look at what this looks like geographically, this is the top 50 destinations before or after visiting the rail trail. And you can see they're clustered right along the corridor of the trail itself, which is a great sign. It means that when people come into the community and use the trail, either right before it or right after it, they're going to local businesses, in many cases within the trail towns themselves, but if not, very close to the trail towns. You can compare this to what it looks like when you map a state park visit. This is Pinchot State Park in northern York County. Still gets lots of visitation to local businesses. There's a cluster right around the park, but because your travel to businesses is based on getting in your car and leaving, it spreads the spending out across multiple counties instead of a few communities. All the spending's still there regionally, it just looks a little bit different. So back on the Heritage Rail Trail, we can take that list and actually extrapolate how many customer visits came directly from trail users during the last year. This is 2023, so a little dated. But you can see our local Rutter's convenience store, 2,100 visits directly from trail users. Glen Rock Mill Inn, which is actually like finer dining in Glen Rock, 3,200 customer visits. The convenience store in Glen Rock, 3,800 customer visits. And we can walk into every one of those businesses and say, hey, we know you know that you get patrons from the trail. Here's the scale of that visitation, and we can take it a step further. This is 7 Sports Bar down in New Freedom, which is one of our trail towns. We actually provided a facade grant and some support for their outdoor dining. They have told us that their average customer spends about $19 per visit. If we know that 2,241 customers came from the trail into 7 in the last year, then we can quantify for them that there was about $42,000 in new revenue from trail users. And keep in mind, not everybody carries a cell phone. So this is the most conservative estimate that we could give, but it just allows a business to see what that tangible impact is to their bottom line. And this is for 1 year. The trail has been there for decades, and this business has been there for probably a decade. So you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in money coming into that business from trail users. And that's one business out of 50 that are in our trail friendly business program. So our goal is to reinforce all this. And the tactical way we've done that is by making mini grants to trail town businesses, very small grants for things like inventory or a new sign or a bike rack. We've done facade grants at businesses and homes within our trail towns. We've raised $3 million in construction capital for trail town projects. I think I have an example of that, maybe. And then 50 plus trail friendly businesses who have all committed to welcoming trail users. So when you go into our trail towns, you see these big signs that say, we're a trail friendly business, which means if you're muddy or you're sweaty or you need to refill your water bottle or you need to use the restroom or lock up your bike, you're welcome there. And then increasingly, the thing we're really excited about is overcoming the barriers to capital in these towns that haven't seen a lot of new investment. And so through our Community Development Financial Institution, our CDFI, we can now make low collateral, low interest loans to businesses to start in our trail towns. And we just closed our first loan in a trail town about 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So most of our funding for trail towns in the first few years was DCED funded through their marketing to tourist program. And then our grant program in particular also was matched with funding from our community foundation. And then our CDFI loan funding is actually federal money through the US Treasury and the state small business credit initiatives. So the impact in the last 4 years has been 23 new businesses created in our trail towns and 4 businesses retained. To me, this doesn't sound like a lot because I'm used to working in larger cities where you might have 40 new businesses in any given year. But in a place like Seven Valleys, to have any new business, or Glen Rock, some of these are the first new businesses in a decade or more, and they are very diverse. So you have things like that are very predictable, like we have breweries popping up. But we also have a fresh food grocer that opened in Glen Rock that's providing, access to fresh food where there wasn't any for a really long time. So just to show you that this is not just a, one trail kind of thing, you're all familiar with the Pine Creek Rail Trail, one of the most loved trails in Pennsylvania. Just to give you a sense of the growth that it's seen in the economic impact it has, between 2018 and 2024, total annual visits to the trail has been up 42%. Unlike many of our trails that saw a spike during the pandemic and then a slow decline, this kind of happened on Pine Creek Rail Trail. You can see in 2021 a big peak, but actually 2024 was its record year for visitation with 423,000 visits that we were able to capture with cell phone data. There were probably more. And you can see those peaks and troughs with the seasonality of people coming to the trail. But it's really cool to see that even during the supposed off seasons, this is looking back 7 years, you're still getting like 20,000 visits a month on this rail trail, even in the winter. So very popular trail, sustaining a lot of businesses. And because of that, you can see the really broad reach of visitation to this trail in very rural Pennsylvania, with some really cool concentrations, of course, locally, which is good to see, but then down in like Berks and Harrisburg and Lancaster, there's a concentration of visitation connected there, and then really across the Mid-Atlantic and the Midwest and up into the Northeast. You can also see how this changed over time. So when you look at prior to 2017, those concentrations of visitation are still there. But when you look at visitation in 2024, you can see how broadly that map is filled in. So it has steadily attracted more and more people from more and more places. And just like on the Heritage Rail Trail, there's this nice spread of quality of life use. So 33% of all visitors are coming from less than 10 miles from the trail. And then quite a few are coming from very, very close, meaning they're living in the trail towns themselves. And then some regional use. And then you do get 42% tourism. So as we all know, Pine Creek Rail Trail is a big tourism asset. And because of that, you get substantially more tourist visits a year, with a potential to be at the heart of $32 million of consumer spending just from that tourism, just from tourism alone, not the regional spending. Again, you can look at the kinds of places people go to before and after they use the trail. In the case of Pine Creek Rail Trail, they visited 374 other businesses before and after they went to the trail. So that's everything from lodging to restaurants to gas stations, everything in between. You see a category on there called hotels and casinos. In this case, mostly hotels and motels, maybe some random casino visits somewhere. But there's a lot of lodging use associated with the Pine Creek Rail Trail, which really drives up the spending and the overnight stays. These are the top 20 destinations before and after the trail, and it's a good mix of local visitation to independent businesses. Normally, when you look at a list like this, Walmart is always at the top because people are stocking up and they know the brand and they just go there reflexively. Here you actually have two small independent businesses before you even get to a Wise Markets. And so it's really cool to see that a lot of the wealth generation and spending happening around Pine Creek Rail Trail is actually going to local businesses and keeping that wealth local. And geographically, this is what it looks like with that spending. You can see it happening along the trail corridor in some of the larger trail towns like Jersey Shore and Wellsboro. And just to give you one example, like I did for the other trail, the Venture Inn, which was topping out that list, is one of the most popular places, bar and burger place. So I didn't talk to them to find out how much they spent. I just put myself in their shoes and I was like, what if you bought a Venture Burger, which is, it's named after them. I think it has onion rings and French fries and barbecue sauce. And then you got some fries, that's $16. Floating Feathers, Lock Haven Lager, and yes, that's how lager is spelled in that case, $6. So say you're spending $22 per customer visit. They got 16,476 customer visits in the last year from the Pine Creek Rail Trail. So even if that, and frankly, when do you go and spend only $22? You're spending more than that. You're having like 3 beers. You're spending $362,000, and that's just one business out of 300 some that are benefiting from patronage from this trail. Over the last, let's see, since 2018, that adds up to $1.7 million that rail trail users have spent in the Venture Inn, if we use that logic. And this is one business along one trail in Pennsylvania. There are thousands of businesses along our trails in Pennsylvania are getting, maybe not this much, but a significant amount of spending. And that's kind of the whole premise behind trail towns and why we need to pay a lot of attention to this as part of our economic strategy. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Brett, and then at the end, Brett and I can take questions from all you.
A lot of interesting data and figures in Silas's presentation. The one that caught my eye was the $6 margarita at the Seven Sports Bar. It's a pretty competitive price for margaritas.
That's a Tuesday night special.
That's Tuesday night specials. Brett Hollern, Vice President for Western Pennsylvania for the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. If you're not 100% familiar with PEC, we are not statewide nonprofit. We've been around for about over 50 years now. We have offices in Pittsburgh, State College, Philadelphia, and Dallas. I have to get away from saying Scranton, Pennsylvania. We work to help protect Pennsylvania's air, land, water. We do a lot of work in outdoor recreation and trails. And we do a lot of partnership work with Pennsylvania DCNR. So with that, I'm not going to talk a lot about data and figures. Silas did a wonderful job of that. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how PEC sort of positions our trails and outdoor recreation assets from a regional perspective. We think about trail connectivity and how we think about what the next sort of great big things are in outdoor recreation and how Pennsylvania can benefit from them. Silas said, hey, can you come talk to CONRAC about trails? And I said, that's all I do all day is talk about trails. So not a problem. So some of the stuff's going to be stream of consciousness. Hopefully the slides keep me on task, but have to talk about the GAP. This project's near and dear to me. I graduated from Penn State with a recreation and park management degree. My first job was with Somerset County as a planner. My first project was a restoration of a train station on the Myersdale Trailhead. From there, I was hired as the, what was the title? The Trails and Greenways Development Coordinator for the Allegheny Trail Alliance, which was a DCNR circuit rider funded position. And then I spent the next 21 years professionally working on developing, building, and maintaining the Great Allegheny Passage. We know the GAP is a huge economic generator. It's really the gold standard. One of the great things, we had visionary leadership in Linda McKenna Box. We started tracking stuff way, way, way back when. Trail use, every year we had counters out. We got really good at counting people on a long linear corridor. We've done economic. I think this is our latest, and I say this because after I left and came to PEC, I chaired the GAP Conservancy for another 5 years. Just recently, it's first time in 26 years professionally, I haven't had an official relationship with the GAP, but I still say us. $121 million, really. I think the numbers track. You see $496 per trip. That's pretty close to the numbers Silas was using. And the one that I love is the $800,000 per mile, because I think it cost us about $80,000 a mile when we break it down over the course of the 20-some years it took to build the GAP. That's pretty good return on investment, if you ask me. This is just a broad sampling here of the type of work PEC does to sort of help people think regionally about how they can brand themselves as an outdoor recreation destination, how sort of these large regional networks like the Industrial Heartlands Trails Coalition or the Circuit Trails Network can really start to help people think more that they're part of something else versus just being their own independent trails, right? Because we know that electeds and our state agencies love us to think regionally. So one of the things PEC does is help people create that vision for that regional approach. See I guess it would be on your left. Some of the statewide projects that we're involved with. The Industrial Heartlands Trail Coalition takes a pretty good swath of Western Pennsylvania. We have the NEPA Trails Forum in the Northeast, the Circuit Trails in the Southeast. We are currently working on a project called Ride the Wilds, which is a comprehensive look at cycling assets and how to better leverage it in the Pennsylvania wilds. And then it's kind of noticed there's kind of an empty area down here in the central part of the state where there's no lines, but we just completed what you see to the right, the central Pennsylvania, South Central region trail network study, which came out with 2 priority corridors that we believe, and all this work, I should say, we don't do this in a vacuum. We're doing this with stakeholders. We want the public involved and engaged because as these gentlemen were talking about before, it's really about the people in these regions and not so much us telling them what they should be doing. We want to hear what they have to say and then craft something that's going to be a useful resource to help guide their path towards completing some of these projects. The Industrial Heartlands Trail Coalition, this is a big one. It's 10 years. It came out of the Power of 32 initiative, which was an economic development initiative that was positioned around southwestern Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. We were fortunate to have some funding for the Benedum Foundation that really seeded this effort. And you see these major corridors are all trail networks. This isn't envisioned so much as a destination type system, but more of a coalition of groups all working towards the same goal. And one of those goals is the connectivity that can come out of that collaborative approach. One example of how we've leveraged the Industrial Heartlands Trail Coalition, if you see to the left, is the Erie to Pittsburgh, this report. We pursued ARC funding and said, hey, we'd love to have some money to build trails. And they said, well, you really should be doing some planning first, right? Because everybody wants you to do planning to tap into funding. So we did that. We went out and we field assessed all the gaps on the Erie to Pittsburgh Trail and the Pennsylvania Wilds Loop Trail system. Came back with some recommendations and a report that all these individual trail organizations that make up these systems can then utilize to pursue funding. We had taken some of the results from that report, put together a grant application, found a partner in Crawford County, and pursued an ARC grant for about $1.5 million. That project went to a phase of the Brady Tunnel, which is one of the well-known, which just completed top 10 trail gap here in Pennsylvania. We also put some money towards the Knox and Kane Trail and the East Branch Trail. We were successful in a second phase of that funding, which funding will go towards a project in Oil Creek State Park where we're partnering with DCNR Bureau of State Parks. And hopefully we're going to close a key gap on the Knox and Kane Trail that will then have about 18 miles of continuous trail from the borough of Kane, just west of the borough of Kane, the whole way to Kinzua Bridge State Park, which would sort of leave one big remaining gap on the Knox and Kane on the entire 70 miles left to go. And that project's really one that you can start to think about how closing a gap, because you've got 40 miles here and 15 miles here with 14 to 16 miles in the middle. No one's going to come from far away to ride a trail where they have to stop, right? But if you build that section, what does that do? That creates an average ride at 35, 40 miles. It's a 2-day trip. Bang, there's your overnight spending. Circuit Trails in Philadelphia. It's a 500-mile network of trails. You can see all the partners that it takes. It really, I think the Circuit Trails project really exemplifies how visionary thinking takes partnerships and collaboration to get to implementation. Someone from our Philly office was here to tell us, but I forget where that project stands at those 500 miles, but significant progress has just been made. It's opened a wonderful bridge last weekend, and the Circuit Trails is very, sort of a bit different. We think a lot of times about trails in a more rural setting, but the Circuit Trails is really, I think, a model for how these networks can exist in very heavily, densely populated areas where it's not just economic development, it's quality of life, it's transportation, it's all the myriad of things that we always talk about when we talk about the benefits of trails. In Western Pennsylvania, here the Allegheny County, under former County Executive Richard Fitzgerald, put their ARPA funding towards a trail development fund. We are currently working in partnership with Friends of the Riverfront on this Turtle Creek Connector Trail, which you can see circled in red, sort of a unique opportunity to connect the Westmoreland Heritage Trail, the Erie to Pittsburgh Trail, and the Great Allegheny Passage by this project that's in a very, very urban environment through lots of disadvantaged neighborhoods, lots of challenges. There'll be on-road sections, but there's a good budding opportunity to acquire 4 miles of a former Norfolk Southern line that was acquired but never constructed. And you can see here just a little bit of the, it's full-blown engineering and planning project that, of course, we're using consultants to assist with. But once that planning is done, then we can take the next step of figuring out how we go find the funding to get this project built. This comes from this report, and I'll pass it around. I think this is something when we set out, this is another project that was funded by the ARC. When we set out for this project, it was more, we thought it was going to be this traditional connectivity study. But as we really started to dig into what was happening in Northeast PA and all the trails, it was pretty clear that they knew what their challenges were with trail connectivity. So rather than just redo something, we said, well, okay, you have a pretty clear path of what it's going to take to close these gaps and create these long distance trail networks and opportunities. How about if we start to think about how you build culture and start to look outside of just the physical infrastructure to really create sort of that, Bentonville, Arkansas, to use an example of a reputation as places people want to go to cycle, and how everybody, the stakeholders, the business community, the residents can benefit from this. And what we started to do was think, planning can be kind of boring, right? It can be kind of vanilla. So get rid of that. So we actually started to think differently about how plans are put together. And of course, we did all our traditional public engagement, user surveys. We learned everything we could. We had stakeholder visioning sessions. But then we put together a plan that I think is useful, comes with recommendations. Stakeholders can then go pursue funding. But it's also something you want to look at, right? Because planning can be, again, pretty vanilla. This is the Ride the Wilds. This is from the soon-to-be published Ride the Wilds effort that we're working on in partnership with the Pennsylvania Wild Center for Entrepreneurship and DCNR. Again, this is talking, how do you take an area that's as big as Connecticut and create a cycling identity? Because think about it, it's a massive area. Jake's Rocks, trail just recently named Trail of the Year. In the 14-county area, it's really the only destination mountain bike system. So we know kind of like from the get-go, they could benefit from more mountain biking opportunities, closer to home mountain biking opportunities. So, you build, one of the challenges are Pennsylvania Interscholastic Cycling League, right? They don't have places for kids to go learn how to ride bikes, places close to home to train. They don't have to be these destination trail systems, but they are a gateway to, opportunities for kids to get out, ride bikes, learn to ride bikes, and then become mountain bikers, and then continue on and spend money traveling for mountain biking as they get older. Again, from another piece from the Ride the Wilds stakeholder engagement, here we are, scenes from New Trail Brewing. We just had an opportunity to visit New Trail and sit down with their marketing director to talk about how and why they position themselves as an outdoor brand when they're a brewery. They're not being classified as part of the outdoor economy in the traditional sense, but here they are catering to outdoor enthusiasts, building their brand, New Trail, their most famous beer, Broken Heels. Like every one of their products has some outdoor connotation when named. And then they do these really wonderful things like Replenish IPA, which was a beer that all the proceeds, well, a certain proportion of proceeds went back to planting trees. They partner with Pennsylvania Parks and Forest Foundations for the Love My State Park series of beers, and each one of those will benefit the state parks. So there's really these, unique opportunities for how a business that may not be traditionally viewed as an outdoor economy to give back and be part of that outdoor economy. Again, this is our Ride the Wild. You can see it's not finished. Insert subtitle here. Anybody has any ideas, we'll take suggestions. One of the things we did, in the upper right corner, is we did this analysis of the communities, and based on some of the criteria for what percentage has disability. This is getting at the, this needs to benefit the local populations as much as it does to be a tool to bring people in from outside, something that Silas really stressed. And you'll see here as a recommendation, develop a coordinated strategic approach to fill high value trail gaps. And then we go on to talk about what those trail gaps are. Prioritization in our world is a tough thing because everybody wants their piece of the pie. But, and I'll go back and point to the Great Allegheny Passage. One of the reasons the Great Allegheny Passage got completed because there was prioritization and people stepped aside. The vision for the gap was, we're going to connect Pittsburgh with Washington, D.C., but the Big Savage Tunnel in the middle of nowhere was a stumbling block. And instead of saying, all right, well, we'll get to that, that became the highest priority. When we pursued funding, there were groups that stood down and said, we're not going to go in for grants because we understand that the need, where the need is, and we'll have to be patient. That's a tough nut to crack when you ask people to do that. But prioritization is something that really, if to sort of accelerate the economic benefits of trails, sometimes it's a necessary thing to consider. This is, I think Silas touched on this a little bit when we talk about, we are the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, but what are state lines other than just imaginary borders? This was a project that we got involved in because there was an interest in how does Pittsburgh become an outdoor hub? You have these other cities, the Denvers, Duluth, Minnesotas, or the Bentonvilles, where people are like, that's an outdoor city. But Pittsburgh, while it has all these wonderful assets, doesn't really have that. So we started to think about Pittsburgh as a hub and what is accessible within sort of a 3 to 4 hour radius drive from Pittsburgh. And you start to see all these, this is really mountain bike focused report and mapping, but you can see, all these opportunities that exist. And we start to think about that as a region. And if I'm a mountain biker, boy, that looks like somewhere I'd certainly like to visit because there's a whole lot of riding opportunities in that. That's our Rust Belt to Rec Belt work. From that. And that segued into talking about mountain biking. The Trust for Public Lands and in partnership with IMBA just released this economic impacts of mountain biking study. They're finding that, they did an analysis of targeted riding destinations and found that people are spending, on average between $100 to up to $1,100 per day on trips. Can't see it because it's small, but that's a more localized analysis that was done at Jake's Rocks on spending for visitors to Jake's Rocks. And why do I bring up mountain biking? Because Pennsylvania's custom built for it. We have topography in spades, and while our local clubs and organizations have done a wonderful job in developing trail systems, as a state, we really haven't capitalized on the assets we currently have and the opportunities that we have until recently. The Office of Outdoor Recreation has been really behind the development of mountain biking. Speaking of, there's our Director of Outdoor Office of Outdoor Recreation, smiling as he's coming over the rocks at Jake's Rocks. But these are two projects I just want to call out. We recently partnered with the Altoona Water Authority on a reforestation project on the lands that they have above Horseshoe Curve. That's the picture in the upper right-hand corner on the side of the screen. That sort of gold channel that you see beside the pristine blue water is acid mine drainage, draining off of the Altoona Water Authority's watershed that sits above the Horseshoe Curve. Through that reforestation effort, we learned that the Altoona Water Authority was interested in opening these I think 12,000 acres up to outdoor recreation. They had recently acquired some abandoned mine lands with funding from DCNR's and they had some local group building some mountain bike trails. So we got engaged and learned that, you know, while they were doing a pretty good job, they could use some help in figuring out how to build mountain bike trails. And we've to date have professionally designed almost 40 miles of mountain bike trails. This property sits on the Allegheny front. It's absolutely amazing. And we see a real opportunity with this project to sort of combine reclamation and recreation and quality of life and create a destination mountain bike system. Silas mentioned about, you know, economic development agencies. The Altoona Blair County Development Corporation is a huge supporter of this project. They're already talking about it. They want to bring people, they want to have these quality of life assets. We have an $8 million grant into Pennsylvania DEP under their AMLR program, which is Abandoned Mineland Economic Revitalization Funding. And if successful, we'll get to work on getting these trails, site access, trailheads built in the next few years. And then on the right is, that's the Ohio Powell State Park. Very active. Ohio Powell Bike Club is there building trails on the clay mines. But there's a new effort underway to have 20 miles of professionally designed natural surface mountain bike optimized trails done there to create probably the first of its kind where a state park is actively trying to build mountain bike trails. So that's something else that we start that project here this summer and hopefully be able to find some funding to get that done. And if you see, we estimate with the Altoona project that, you know, the potential economic impact based on some modeling we've borrowed from the Bailey's Trail System in Southeast Ohio, 110,000 visits, $13.5 million in visitor spending, and I think that's pretty conservative. The other area I think we have a huge opportunity to do in Pennsylvania is gravel riding. Not good economic data on gravel cycling. But what we do know is from the industry perspective, next to e-bikes, gravel bikes are the largest growth sector in the bicycle industry. What's the beauty of gravel cycling? No maintenance costs, no development costs. Pennsylvania's got 26,000 miles of gravel roads. Tech's been doing a lot of work and thinking about how we sustainably grow the activity while also capitalizing, particularly in rural environments where most of our dirt roads are, to make sure that these routes that are being developed by DMOs and TPAs are touching are finding their ways into the community so that economic development aspect isn't lost. I point to the Lewisburg Fall Festival on Unpaved. Unpaved is a huge cycling event. Unpaved at the Susquehanna River Valley generates about the town's built a fall festival around it. They moved their fall festival to coincide with Unpaved. That weekend brings about $2 million into Lewisburg. So we really see a huge opportunity for the state to capitalize on gravel cycling. So I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. We've built over 2,000 miles of rail trail in Pennsylvania on top of the other multi-use trails. And we've done a very terrible job of figuring out how we're going to maintain all this infrastructure we've built. Lots of people like to show up to cut a ribbon, but nobody cuts a ribbon to clean out a ditch. And we're at a critical point in in Pennsylvania with how we're going to deal with all this infrastructure. A lot of this we've tasked to nonprofits, volunteer labor. Why am I talking about maintenance when we're here to talk about trails and economic development? Because if these trails fall apart, the economic development that's inherently tied to them falls apart too. So we really have to start to think strategically about how we're going to ensure that all this infrastructure we've built is going to be maintained and come up with an approach, because a lot of the capacity that our trail organizations have is absorbed by routine maintenance and mowing grass. We have dwindling volunteer resources. That's not just a trail problem, that's a societal problem. And if we don't start to figure out how we're going to backfill some of that capacity, we're going to continue to have challenges with the states of our trails. And, all these problems are exacerbated by changing climate, severe weather events, and just use. We love our trails to death in some cases. So what's that doing? I'm here to plug our new Trail Maintenance Assessment Guide, which we believe to be the first of its kind, not first of its kind, but probably as comprehensive as a resource as there is out there, talking about trail maintenance and how to deliver trail maintenance, but not just how to deliver, what's causing your problems. I'll pass this around. So, it sort of talks comprehensively about where we are as a community of trail builders and maintainers, how we got here and what our challenges are, the challenges our trails are facing, and puts together really an approach that helps people, particularly our volunteers who probably weren't classically trained trail maintainers. There is such a thing. Why are we getting puddling? Why is the asphalt heaving? How can we prevent it really? And what we're trying to get at is, taking a proactive approach to maintenance versus the reactive approach that many of our maintainers are faced with. And to sort of put our money where our mouth is, so to speak, we're working in tandem with this assessment guide to develop a phone-based application that allows trail organizations to cheaply and effectively inventory and assess their infrastructure. We've assessed using this tool, we've assessed over 250 miles of different trails in Pennsylvania, multi-use paths of varying types, urban, rural, asphalt, crushed limestone, just to get a sense, because we need data. If we're going to go to funders and cry that we need money for maintenance, we need to have some data to back it up. And so this tool will then upload to a web-based map, and now a trail manager has all their inventory in a GIS system. They can click on the points that they've cataloged in the field, and have a photo, have an assessment rating, have any information. For instance, if you're installing something new, when it was installed, or when your trail section was last resurfaced, and then you can take and download that into data to help plan for maintenance for the future. So I just want to stress that, if there's something, the CONRAC can do, it's really to talk to and make some recommendations about how you can put some really dedicated funding towards maintenance. And I'm not talking about cutting grass or picking up trash. Inspections, bridge inspections are ungodly expensive, right? The Salisbury Viaduct, one of the marquee structures on the Great Allegheny Passage, maintenance or a bridge inspection on that's $150,000, and you should be doing that every 5 years. So, drainage inspections. If it's growing or flowing, it's going to cause your trail a problem, and we're too busy worried about what the user sees and the experience the user has to really care about the core infrastructural needs that our trails have. So with that, I'll get off my soapbox and conclude my presentation.
Well, that was excellent. Thank you, Brett. Any questions for Brett or myself? Bob?
I just, shameless plug for the outdoor recreation group. Brett talked to us earlier, about a year ago, on what's in this report. And that's actually where our group got its start. Our first issue was how are we going to maintain all these trails? The ATV stuff's kind of taken over a little bit since then, but that is so. if you're new to the council or if you're not a part of the group and are interested, please let us know.
Brett, the app that you showed there, is that public yet, or will that be rolled out publicly?
We can talk.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been working with a consultant that has sort of been managing the data and handling the creation of the maps needed for it, and they're migrating everything to us. So we're sort of in a pause phase. But yeah, I mean, the idea is we want to get this out there, but there are some back end costs associated with it that we're still kind of trying to figure out how we fund to make it cheap and effective. Because really, that's what we want this to be.
Yeah.
We don't want to, because there is other software out there and applications that do this stuff, but it's cost prohibitive, particularly to a nonprofit trail organization.
Yep. Yeah. And I'll second that. And I'll say some of them are almost too robust, like they do too much and then it gets overwhelming for users. So having a tool that's built around the specific need and is accessible is huge.
Brett, I had just a quick question. So trails obviously are big business, as we've learned today. And are you seeing any models across the different states that kind of represent an opportunity for sustainability over time when it comes to managing trail systems, like dedicated funding sources or programs that other states may have adopted?
You know, Nicole, to answer that, it still seems like the focus is on building. Everybody still, you know, I say we have blinders on, but North Carolina and Florida, during our research, we're doing some interesting things around support for trails. Two states in particular that come to mind.
Silas, I have a question for you. Do you feel that you have counterparts in other parts of the state? Like, your perspective to me seems unique. You do a great job of bringing outdoor rec and traditional economic impact kind of information together. Is York County, I think of it as like a revolutionary point in the state, but do you have other places in Pennsylvania that look like that?
Yeah, there definitely are.
Certainly not every county though, probably, right?
No, it's definitely hit or miss. And we did a statewide survey with York College prior to the pandemic that asked economic developers across the state, you know, is outdoor recreation or the outdoor economy part of your strategy? And we asked, you know, I think we asked them, how important is it to your strategy? And something like 88% said it's very important. And then the follow-up question was, are you doing anything to act on it as part of your strategic plan? And it was like 5%, you know, it was very low.
Yeah.
I have seen a lot of promising signs that that's starting to change with more, as you heard from Brett, other economic development corporations and chambers getting more involved. And at our statewide gatherings of economic developers, more content on the program that's related to outdoor recreation.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a tough transition to make because economic development organizations are tasked with, you know, these old set of metrics that is like, how much did you finance? How many square feet did you develop? And those metrics don't always apply to the kind of work that's involved with outdoor recreation economy, but definitely on the right trajectory. And we're seeing more and more of it. Janet?
Thank you.
I was just going to say, for a good example of a developer who gets it is Discover NEPA. So up in the Northeast, there's a commercial real estate developer, Rob Miracle, who in his efforts to bring businesses into the Northeast was realizing that, you know, the locals that, you know, people were meeting were like, you know, there's nothing to do here. So, you know, not really promoting the area. And he has personally funded this discovernepa.org. And I would encourage any of you guys to check it out if you haven't. Sierra knows if you haven't seen it. It's an amazing resource, and he gets it. He gets that people are moving to the area for quality of life. And it's educating not only the folks that he's trying to encourage to move in, but the people that live there so that they realize and they appreciate what they actually have. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Brett, as always. And just to wrap up, we don't have any formal council business. As I said, we'll have a working session over lunch. We'll now open our second public comment period. We don't have any public comment in the room. Is there any online? And seeing none, we'll close our second public comment period, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you.